For years, I have told people that I have bad taste in men, that my picker is broken, that if you put me in a room with a whole bunch of people, I'm going to naturally be attracted to the worst guy in the room, and they are naturally going to be attracted to me because for some reason, we're like magnets, and I magnetically attract guys with issues. The truth is that I've been in unhealthy relationship after unhealthy relationship over the course of my life, despite actively trying to date different guys than the ones that I had dated before. If you look at them at face value, maybe there's a cowboy and maybe there's a gangster and maybe there's a church boy, like you wouldn't think that these people are similar because I have tried to be different to get out of that cycle, and yet somehow I still end up in it. If this has been your experience or you're afraid of this being your experience, this video is for you. If you're new here, welcome. My name is April Hardy, and on this channel we educate people about domestic violence, including how to break free from it and how to thrive after it. If you're returning, hi, welcome back. I'm so glad to see you. Let's get into this today. Okay, so if you have been watching the last several videos, you know that I just recently started trauma therapy again for the second time in my life. The first time it was a few years that we worked on stuff and we made a lot of progress, but I went back into it here recently because A, there was stuff that still didn't get worked on from before, and B, there's been some new stuff since I was with my last trauma counselor. Last week I was called something by my trauma counselor that initially pissed me off, and I wanted to buck and kick at it a lot, but I went and started researching it a little bit and found out that she was right. I think. So instead of doing what I had planned for today, we're going to do this instead because I kind of want to walk you through this journey with me. So I have known so many people that have suffered domestic violence, whether it's domestic violence as a physical violence or emotional abuse or sexual abuse in the relationship or financial abuse or a combination thereof, because it's usually not just one thing. And I think that a lot of people can relate to this. So we're going to start this video by talking about the signs or symptoms that you might have this thing. And I'm going to wait to tell you what this thing is until after we talk about it, because I disagreed until I listened to the signs and symptoms. So, as opposed to you shutting me off and going away as soon as you hear what you don't want to hear, we're going to go through those first. And I'm going to read from the list and then we'll kind of talk about it. So, major cycles in short time frames. So like the makeup, breakup, and then getting back together. It happens in a short period of time. Dependence on sex to fix rough elements in the relationship. Not having a life outside of the relationship. Depending on the relationship for a sense of well-being or identity. Justifying emotional, sexual, or physical abuse. Unable to leave despite red flags. Committing too quickly. Being too needy, like not being able to be independent within that relationship. The inability to see your partner's dysfunction and instead blaming yourself. I would say also maybe you see it and you just don't care, or you refuse to acknowledge their dysfunction. Allowing the partner to return after fights or poor behavior. Feeling exhausted from the frequent highs and lows of a relationship. Relationship obsessiveness. Feeling unloved, resentful, or undesired due to your relationship. Not spending time with loved ones or friends to be able to be in the relationship. Changing yourself to be in the relationship. Changing your habits or behaviors because of the relationship. feelings of anxiety or depression due to the relationship, feeling more tired, confused, irritable, or insecure than usual, using substances to cope with relationship challenges, binge eating, gambling, or acting compulsively in other ways due to relationship challenges, symptoms of codependency, and some can experience other addictive qualities that are similar to love addiction or codependency. That list seems very cold and kind of impersonal to me, so let's talk about it a little bit. Major cycles in short time frames. This is not one that I've experienced a ton of, but I did experience it recently where I thought that we were done. And I went through all of the emotions of losing a relationship that I cared a lot about. And within a couple of weeks, then we were back to not being done anymore. And the counselor was really frustrated because I allowed him to come back and it was like nothing had ever happened, which is further down the list. Or allowing them to come back or return after fights or poor behavior. She believes that I am not willing to put my foot down and keep boundaries against behaviors that are not great. And I am arguing that the good is still more important than the bad, which is probably not a good thing. A dependence on sex to fix issues in the relationship. I literally had a relationship some years back where we got to the point where that was the only good thing in our relationship. Like when we were intimate, we were bonding and close, and that was good, but every other part of our relationship was terrible at that point, and that was the last straw before we ended. But if that's the only thing that's good in your relationship, that's not a good thing. But it's easily justifiable if you are in this state, depending on your relationship, for a sense of well-being or identity. And this is an interesting one that I want to talk about just a little bit, because if you've watched the videos on intimate partner homicide, which I will put up here, or maybe it's up there, one of those, it'll be up in the corner. The root cause of intimate partner homicides with suicides is this. It's that they put so much of their identity into that significant other that when that significant other tries to break the relationship off, then they feel like they're losing themselves. And so then they get into this, if I can't have you, nobody will, and they will often kill their partner and then kill themselves. We can do that on the same, we can do that too. We can put so much of our identity on them or on the relationship or on, I'm good at this thing, I'm good at this relationship, I'm good at being there for him or her, I'm good at whatever, and put our identity there, and that's not good either. Justifying emotional, sexual, mental, or physical abuse. Pretty sure I missed one of those when I was reading it. That's really easy to do. Until an abuse victim gets to the point where they're ready to leave, they're actually ready to leave and they're starting that process. Up until that point, what they're doing is justifying and rationalizing that behavior. And then eventually something will click for them, and then they start the process of trying to work out how to leave when they figure out that it's not their fault and it's not okay. But before that, there's often a period of this justification or rationalizing abusive behavior. The next one is unable to leave the relationship despite red flags. That has been a big one for me, and it's not unable to leave despite red flags, it's unwillingness to leave. Because yes, there is this red flag, and I know better, and I should probably acknowledge that, but he wouldn't do that, but he makes me happy, but he makes me feel good, but I am getting identity from this relationship, but whatever's there. But there's this willingness to put that in place of or bigger than the red flags. It's not an inability, I don't believe, to leave. It's an unwillingness to. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. I am just learning. super early learning, so I'm telling you guys what I'm learning as I'm learning it. Committing too quickly. A huge red flag for domestic violence, intimate partner homicide stuff is them pushing their partner to commit too quickly. On the other hand, a symptom of this particular thing is committing too quickly. So if you have both of those together, that's just a lovely recipe for disaster. And that's part of why people get into these relationships that are so damaging. Being too needy, not being independent in the relationship, inability to see the partner's dysfunction and instead blaming themselves. That goes right back to that justifying and rationalizing. You can see it, you just don't want to see it for whatever reason. And to me, that is just like people asking why didn't they leave. Like, there are so many reasons for these things, and there's a lot of reasons why people justify and rationalize. So I am not blaming anybody or trying to shame you for justifying and rationalizing bad behavior, because we all do it. Whether you're in an abusive relationship or not, we all do it to some extent. We excuse some things that we probably shouldn't in the course of life for whatever. I already mentioned allowing the partner to return after fights or poor behavior. Feeling exhausted from the frequent highs and lows in your relationship. See, this one really stood out to me too, just because if I was to pick any kind of descriptor of these types of relationships, it would be the highs and lows. Highs and lows. It stands out to me clear as day, because I have had many conversations with people where I'm trying to describe what I look for in a relationship, how my relationships go. And this is why I believe that this is truth. I've known something was off in me for a while. My relationships are, I always say, they're with passionate people, guys that think very highly of themselves in some form or fashion. That plays out in different ways, but they're always very passionate. Passionate is the word that I use for it. Passionate in good ways. Like, the good is amazing, but it's also passionate in bad ways, and the bad really sucks. And so obviously I'm not excited about the bad really sucks part, or those lows that this line item is talking about. But the highs are so good. And so then when I look at or consider the idea of having a healthy, normal relationship, it seems very boring to me. Because this is all that I've ever known in relationships, is these high highs and low lows. So this one says feeling exhausted by the frequent highs and lows in your relationship. And it really is. Those relationships are exhausting. You don't have that stability, which I would also say is boring, but it's stable and it's secure, and you don't have that in these relationships. It's a trade. Good or bad, right or wrong. Relationship obsessiveness. Do you think about your relationship all the time, or the person that you're with all the time? If I understand correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm definitely learning, in healthy relationships, that's still an element in the beginning. That's like the head over heels thing. And then that kind of goes away, kind of tapers down over time. But for people like this is talking about, either it doesn't taper off, you stay in that really highly focused on your relationship and on that person, and you think about them all the time when they're not around and things like that, or you frequently change relationships so that you're always in that early stages and it still plays out that way, one or the other. Feeling unloved, resentful, or undesired due to your relationship. What that is like for me is that when I don't feel like they are happy with me, it's like tragic. And then everything that could be wrong with me is wrong with me in my mind. And I need to change everything and fix everything, because I'm clearly a complete train wreck because they're not happy with me in this moment. And it may not even have anything to do with me, and I know that logically, but that is still not how I emotionally respond. I respond as if I'm the cause of everything and everything is wrong with me, and that takes me to a very low. Not spending time with loved ones or friends to be in the relationship, that's not really one that I deal with, but that's definitely one I've seen other people deal with. Changing yourself to be in the relationship. I used to describe myself as a chameleon. I could be whatever people wanted me to be, especially guys. Whatever the guy wanted me to be, I actually was, and still am, very good at figuring out what they want and being that, becoming that for a little while. But the problem with that is it's short-lived. I could be that way for a while, but eventually I'm still me, and it has to come out. And so then those relationships tend to end when they figure out that I'm not what they thought that I was. But while I'm what they think I am, they think that I'm just amazing. Amazing, because I'm what they want. Whatever it is that they want. Changing one's habits or behaviors because of the relationship. The biggest way that this has come out for me, and it's gonna be a couple of items down too, is I tend to drink alcohol more with these particular type of people than what I do otherwise. I'm not a huge get drunk person, so it's still not a lot, but it's a noticeable difference compared to normal. Feelings of depression or anxiety due to the relationship. For me, that plays out like depression in the lows when they're not happy with me, and anxiety about them becoming not happy with me. It's probably how those would play out for me, where I spend a lot of time trying to make sure that they're happy. I'm also a people pleaser. I'm working on that, but it definitely comes out in my romantic relationships. Feeling more tired, confused, irritable, insecure than usual. For me, that usually comes out in irritable and maybe insecure. Yeah, probably insecure, because I'm basing all of my value on what this other person feels about me, thinks about me, and even what they don't. This other person is not God. They're not stable or consistent. God says he loves me no matter what, all the time. It's the same all the time. This person can be hungry, angry, tired, having a bad day that has nothing to do with me at all. Sometimes they have to do with me, but I will take on every single thing like it's my fault. That's been a lifelong challenge for me. Using substances to cope with relationship challenges. Like I said, that tends to be more increased in these situations. Binge eating, gambling, or other compulsive activity when your relationship's having issues. And symptoms of codependency. I'm not going to look up the symptoms of codependency right now because I know that could be another video. And there's really a lot tied in with just this. So this is probably going to be like a part 1 video, and we can do a whole lot more later because this is complex. And it's interesting because 2 days ago, I was reading this stuff and I was like, holy cow, I am definitely this. And then I talked to a 70-year-old man yesterday who's like, I have all kinds of life wisdom and experience. And he basically told me this was a bunch of rubbish and that, people just need to do whatever makes them happy and that's it. And if you want to be with a guy, feed him and have sex and he's good. There's no more depth to them than that, which I disagree with. But it made me question. And I'm going to continue to learn, and I will continue to bring you what I learn. Are you ready for the reveal? It's not even a fun thing. I don't know. So the term for this is relationship addiction. I've heard of love addiction. I've heard of sex addiction. I looked at love addiction a little bit as I was researching for this video because I wanted to know if I wanted to even go into that. And I didn't feel like it was as accurate for me. So that's interesting. But I think what it all boils down to for me is an addiction to the highs and lows, which I've known for a long time about myself. I would never have put it in the term addiction, but I have known for a long time that I'm drawn to those highs and lows, and that other relationships seem really boring. And because I'm drawn to those highs and lows, you guys, then I'm drawn to abusive men and toxic men, because they're not all abusive. That man I was talking to yesterday wanted to know what I meant by abusive, and I think he thought I meant every guy I'm ever with is abusive. They're not. But there's always some level of toxicity to them if they're not just straight out abusive. Oftentimes they're addicts also. And so they're dealing with their own stuff. Maybe they have mental health issues of their own. And sometimes they're just outright abusive. But there's always a way for me to justify that in my mind, especially if they have mental health things or they're dealing with addiction things. Like, they're going through things. They're human beings also, and that's not untrue. But to have somebody who does not deal with things well in their own right with somebody else who's dealing with things that are not good, that's not a great recipe for good things. So it would be really easy for me, just having looked at that list, to start to feel ashamed of myself for being this person. And now I'm an addict and I'm dysfunctional in that way too. And great, I'm freaking broken. And how many decisions that I have made over the years in my relationships have actually been my decisions, and how much of it has just been compulsion, because I definitely can feel compulsion sometimes. Absolutely. Relationshipcenter.com gives the following description for what relationship addiction is. I don't agree with all of it, but I just want to read it for you so that I can give you like a starting point as we are learning about this. So, relationship addiction is characterized by a craving and a loss of control when it comes to being in a relationship with a specific person. Like love addicts, people with relationship addiction seek feelings of euphoria and gain intense chemical reactions and releases while in pursuit of or in a relationship. That part I totally agree with. I think that's where a lot of the addiction stuff comes from. It is literally a physiological, biological experience. Continuing on. While it is normal to feel longing and as if you can't deny the love of your life, relationship addiction is characterized by needing a relationship to be happy. This person cannot be alone and can jump in and out of relationships regardless of its impact on them. Or they can stay in the same relationship, the same unstable, complicated relationship full of drama, make-up to breakup patterns, arguments, and betrayal as opposed to being alone. Oftentimes these traumas begin in childhood or can occur from one's unhealed relationship history, and relationship addiction is a means to solve them. So basically what I'm getting so far is that relationship addiction is rooted in a fear of abandonment. And when people have abandonment issues, it's because they have experienced abandonment at some point in their lives, and they know how much that hurts. And the brain is actually wired to remember things that cause you pain and to avoid them. So, for attachment purposes, if getting a strong attachment to somebody, especially early in your life, if that caused you extreme pain because that attachment was ripped apart, then your brain might tell you don't get strong attachments to anybody anymore. And then you get this pattern of not letting people really come close to you, keeping them at an arm's length away, so to speak. So I looked up attachment trauma, and Frontiers in Psychology published an article in 2019 where I'm going to take a little quote from. Said attachment trauma may occur in the form of basic interpersonal neglect or in the form of physical, mental, or sexual abuse. In many cases, both types are combined. And in that article, it talked about a lot of times it's not just one thing, one time, one instant. It's continuously. So in my case, I have experienced abuse of all kinds for years and years and years, starting when I was young. So it's very understandable that I don't connect well with others. There's significant fear there. And then when I get into romantic relationships, I want for that connection, which we'll talk about here in a second, so much. And then anytime anything might be possible to end that connection and end that relationship, then I respond or react like everything is ending because it's my connection. That's been consistent for me. I have never understood, up until recently, any of that, what the reasoning for that was. I just thought it was me, but it's not. And it's not something for me to be ashamed of. It's just something for me to learn about and work on in myself as much as I can. So one of the things that we are doing in trauma therapy is EMDR therapy, and we're going to work on creating secure attachments because those are important. So let's go into that just a little bit. We could do a whole lot more. First of all, we're designed to connect with people. We need secure attachment from the beginning. When we are born, we are completely dependent on people outside of us, right? To care for us and give us what we need. And then it just continues on for the rest of life. Scientists will tell you that we need attachment as a survival mechanism. The Bible teaches that God created us to be in community, that we are part of a body, and that we can't function on our own, that that's not how we were created. So whether you listen to secular science or you listen to Bible teaching, they don't disagree that we need each other. And in fact, if you look into this and into the science part of it, it is so interwoven into who we are that we need each other, that it is like survival, life and death stuff to not have those attachments, those connections. So when you look at it like that, it's a life or death situation for us every time that we feel like we're going to be abandoned. It's not something that we're doing because we want to do it. That's the point. It's literally a life or death survival thing. It's just twisted for those of us that might be dealing with relationship addiction. It's twisted. What it means is that earlier on in life, and maybe throughout lives, like in my case, attachments that should have been there were not okay. And so I naturally seek attachments where I can find them, while at the same time being terrified of them and not letting most people in. So it's just a whole big ball of mess, and that's part of why I'm back in trauma therapy, because romantic relationships has been one of those things that I wanted to deal with for a long time because I could see patterns. And the truth of the matter is, when you go through experiences and when you make decisions, you form neural pathways in your brain, and you're effectively wiring it a certain way. And there are things that you will do based on that wiring that you're not even consciously doing. And it takes work to rewire that. It's totally possible, but it's needed for a lot of people, especially when those wires are crossed, so to speak, when you're a kid. You're not even aware that there are wires to cross. Secure attachment is a bond that meets a child's need for security, calm, and understanding to allow for optimal development of the nervous system. A child's developing brain organizes itself to provide a foundation based on feeling safe. As the child matures, this foundation can result in healthy self-awareness, eagerness to learn, empathy, and trust. According to the Georgia Department of Human Services, infants who are securely attached have learned that they can trust other people to take care of them. They tend to react well to stress, be willing to try new things independently, form stronger interpersonal relationships, and be superior problem solvers. That is not Insecure attachment. An insecure attachment bond, one that does not meet the child's need for security, calm, and understanding, can hinder a child's brain development for optimal organization. It can also restrain mental, emotional, and physical development. All of this can result in learning problems and difficulty forming relationships as the child or person matures. Accordingly, infants who are insecurely attached do not trust easily, having learned that adults are not reliable. They tend to avoid others, refuse interaction with others, show anxiety, anger, and fear, exaggerate distress. So one of the attachment styles, because there's a few different ones for insecure attachment, one of them, probably like the most difficult one, maybe, is called disorganized, disoriented attachment style. So I want to read you a little bit about that, and then we'll close for today. Disorganized, disoriented attachment style, also referred to as fearful avoidant attachment style, stems from intense fear, often as a result of childhood trauma, neglect, or abuse. Adults with this style of insecure attachment tend to feel like they don't deserve love or closeness in a relationship. And so how this can affect you, if you're a disorganized attachment style, you've likely never learned to self-soothe your emotions, so both relationships and the world around you can feel frightening and unsafe. If you experienced abuse as a child, you may try to replicate the same abusive patterns of behavior as an adult. You may find intimate relationships confusing or unsettling and often swing between emotional extremes for your partner. You may be insensitive towards your partner and selfish, controlling, untrusting, which can lead to explosive and or abusive behavior. And you can be just as hard on yourself as others. So that, in that situation, might be the abuser that also has the same attachment issues. Or there are definitely some situations, some relationships where both people are abusive towards each other. You may exhibit antisocial or negative behavior patterns, alcohol or drug abuse, be prone to aggression or violence. Others may disparage your refusal to take responsibility for your actions. While you crave the security and the safety of a meaningful, intimate relationship, you also feel unworthy of love and terrified of getting hurt again. That's probably my primary way that shows up in my life. Your childhood may have been shaped by abuse, neglect, or trauma. All of that to say, we definitely have choices in life. We have free will, we have choices, and we need to take ownership for those things. In my book, I talk about the fact that you have to own your power. You have to own that you have choices. Otherwise, you're giving all your power to the other person. And if you give all of your power to the other person, you have no ability to get out of it. You have no ability to change anything. So you have to own that you have choices. On the other hand, though, there are some things that are built into us over time, and those things are harder to overcome. And they're still possible to overcome. That's one of the reasons that I'm a proponent or an advocate for trauma therapy, because there are things that if we could fix them on our own, we would. But there are some things that you just need help with. You don't know what you don't know, until you know. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes you need to have somebody from the outside teach you things, like how to rewire your brain. Because if you learned these attachment styles, especially early on in life, before you knew there was such a thing as attachment styles, you might need help reworking that. You might need help learning, what does a trustworthy person look like? Because I really want to be able to trust somebody, but I don't trust anybody. I don't have any idea what a trustworthy person would even look like, and everybody that I have tried to trust screws me over or hurts me. So you need somebody to show you those things. I want to be here to show you those things, and I want to be here to teach you what I'm learning as I go on my journey. So, what do you think? Relationship addiction. It's an interesting concept. Maybe we'll continue to look at it over time. I would love to hear your thoughts. questions, things that I can research related to relationship addiction or anything else. But especially this topic, I'm really curious. I honestly had never heard it. I've heard of love addicts and sex addicts and stuff, but this is new to me. So, new little piece to the puzzle to consider, I guess. That's all for me today. I hope that you have a good Valentine's Day. Oh yeah, it's not. One of the ladies on my team wrote some pretty cool Valentine's letters. One to yourself specifically, and then one to abuse survivors. So I will link that in the description below. Go check it out. It's a cool take on Valentine's Day. Until I see you again, stay safe. Thanks for watching. I'll do my part to keep you safe by continuing to put out weekly videos about all things related to intimate partner violence. If you haven't already, please do your part by subscribing to this channel and hitting the notification button so that you don't miss a single video. Bonus points if you share videos with people that you believe will benefit from the information. Until I see you again, stay safe.